Welcome to Discover Health, a White Mountain perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Tom Barela. Today we have a special guest in Joan Courtney, a clinical hypnotist. And most of you probably don't know much about clinical hypnosis. And I got to admit, I don't either. But I thought this would be an interesting program for us because we have such an expert here on the mountain. And I'll say welcome, Joan.
Thank you, Tom. Just nice to be here.
Well, I'm glad that it's nice to be here today. And to get started a little bit, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into clinical hypnosis.
What's interesting about that, my husband and I were teaching on university level because I have a doctorate in business administration as well. We were teaching a sales class. And one way to get salesmen motivated, to give them confidence, to encourage them, would be to put them into trance and have them, the minute their hand hits the doorknob, they are filled with confidence. And that's what started this particular road.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and then there must be some training involved with this.
Considerable amount of training. It took 6 months to a year to develop the training. Then I go back every year for 30 units of continuing education credit. I'm versed in not only clinical but medical hypnotherapy. And I got involved in the medical aspects because so many of my clients were coming in saying, I have to go in for an operation. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do now. Or I'm anxious, or I can't sleep at night, whatever that might be. So able to help on the medical as well as clinical approaches.
And you actually have a business up here called Unstuck Living?
I have a business called Unstuck Living.
What an interesting name. Is Unstuck have an underlying reason?
Unstuck has an underlying reason. I think so many of us get stuck in a particular way of doing things. We repeat what we do time after time after time. And Tom, if it's no longer useful to us, why do it? And it gets us stuck, doesn't it?
It does.
Sure.
What an interesting concept. Well, let's get right into it then. Let's go. Tell us a little bit about what hypnosis is and what, I guess, clinical hypnosis or hypnotherapy is.
Okay. Hypnosis is a natural, normal way of being. It involves focused concentration and inner attention. We go into and out of hypnosis on a daily basis because all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. If you think about that. If you're on a computer, you're in hypnosis. Hours can fly by. You don't know where that time went. You watch kids on their video games. Oh, hello, there's nobody home then. That's hypnosis. Sure.
Wow.
If you and I were to watch a TV program, sometimes that can be quite hypnotic. I think the most favorite story I have about that is I was watching football with my daughter-in-law. Now, she is a Chicago Bears fan. I am a football freak, so there we were. But what was interesting to me is as the Bears went from one end of the field to the other, we were moving on the sofa in that direction. We were in trance working with them.
I tend to think of it as being so engrossed in a TV program that you don't hear the telephone ring.
Exactly, and that's hypnosis in itself. You and I are to go to the movies, and I'm going to date myself and talk about old Indiana Jones. When Indiana Jones almost gets bumped off the cliff by a bad guy, my heart beats a little faster, my breathing changes, my hands get sweaty. That's hypnosis too, or the drive from Show Low to Holbrook. Whole stretches of that road I know I've never seen.
That's interesting because it's a very boring drive.
It is, but if a big old elk is going to come bounding across the road, you're going to pop out of trance and take care of business.
Oh, interesting.
So you're actually more in control when you're involved in hypnosis than you are right now. Another interesting part of this is from the time you're born till you're 11 or 12, you're involved in hypnosis. Everything that's said to you or done to you during that time is taken in on a very literal basis.
Tell me a little bit about hypnosis how it leads to hypnotherapy.
Hypnosis leads to hypnotherapy in that it focuses on one issue at a time. Our mind can't handle any more than one thing at a time. It can chunk things down. It was interesting to me, for example, if you think about phone numbers. And now everybody has it in a cell phone. But when we had to remember phone numbers, it's the easiest way to remember, because we can remember in chunks of 5 plus or minus 2. So we're looking at focusing on one thing at a time.
Okay.
Would be as if we were going into a very dark room and shining a spotlight in one area. Some people, when they come in, are concerned and they say, oh, you're going to know everything about my life. No, if you're coming in, say, to drop weight or to stop smoking or to become less anxious or more confident, that's what we will focus on.
So hypnotherapy really just uses whatever techniques you're going to tell us about to focus on one particular area. So a lot of this must have to do with brain processing and how things occur within our brain.
It's the most interesting part of this. We have a communication model where we have an external event come in. When that event comes in, we're going to go back to past memories and distort or generalize what we have learned from those times. Then we'll also run this particular event through all sorts of filters. These filters could involve history. My mom always did it this way, or my dad told me to do it this way, whatever that might be. Developing into meta programs, very much larger programs than what they are right now.
Okay.
Coming down through, again, either a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic mode of interpreting the world. In other words, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, which is feeling.
And touching.
You interpret yourself, that's that internal representation, moving into a physiological response, and then you have a behavior. Now, what was curious to me is that we have a quarter of a second from the time that stimulus comes in until we respond. It's not long enough to say, I'm not going to reach for that piece of chocolate cake. I don't need that second helping. And hypnosis is most helpful because, again, going back to the example of the tiny baby, say if we had a little baby, a dog came over, played with the baby, good experience, there's a little crease in that baby's brain. Forever after that, if she has another good experience with a dog or a neighbor's dog or a dog on TV, that crease gets deeper and deeper till it gets to be a rut.
Okay.
Okay if it's a positive rut, but if it's a negative
Yeah, if
rut,
it's a negative.
oh, you got some problems. And it's causing dissension within. What hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming serve to do is help to put a gate on that rut.
Okay, so if a bad experience is tactile, visual, or hearing, hearing is one of them, come into you. But it also must be experiential too.
Experiential in what way?
Experience where, your boss comes in here and he's always angry. Is that part of the sensory input?
Again, that would be sensory input, but that's going to go back to prior memories. It's curious to me. If I have someone, for example, that comes in and says, I'm terrified in talking in front of people. Generally, we're going back in time. I had one lady come in when she was 3 years old. She was darling. But she was up on stage for like a church play or something, and she forgot her lines. Her mom kept trying to coach her, and the audience started to laugh, and that just shut down her ability to do that. But once she'd gotten past that, it took one session for her to do that, and she just moved on through. Again, going back to the example of we have a rut, hypnosis, NLP puts a gate on that rut. The little part inside that keeps sending this information, for example, it's time to reach for a cigarette, or it's time to be anxious in this situation, says, I'm so sorry, I thought I was doing it the right way. There are at least 30 to 40 other ways to get from here to where you want to go. And we will try any and all of them till we get to where it is that you want to be. And if you're not satisfied with those, we'll work on even more.
So part of what you do is, instead of those 30 or 40 different ways, you focus in on the issues or
The
communication?
Yes, the client and I will focus in on the issues, but the client will actually develop those 30 to 40 different ways.
I see.
Because I could develop things till the cows came home, but they may not be satisfying to the client. And the client is the one that will actually develop what this is. Let me give you another example.
Okay.
Had a lady come in and she said, I'm gaining weight because every time, the old Bocados, every time I would go to Bocados with my husband, we go for lunch. We go past the sandwich line, I have them make my sandwich, and then I always have to have my cookie. It's the cookie that's the problem. We know this. So I helped her let go of the cookie, and she saw other things. She had other patterns of behavior by the time she left the office. She laughed when she left, and she said, well, we'll see. We're going to test this. She had lunch with her husband. Husband was all of a sudden paying for lunch. And he said, where's your cookie? She goes, oh, I don't need a cookie. I don't want a cookie anymore. He goes, you always have a cookie. You get your cookie. Don't want a cookie. She had completely forgotten about the cookie. So it's that quick where the mind can literally respond, and other options, other patterns, other ways of being. Hypnosis and hypnotherapy serves to reinforce the positive things that are going on in our lives.
So you essentially focus on that particular area. I mean, I don't know how you do it yet. I don't hope.
Sure.
Hopefully. So, and essentially, we get the information, our brain processes it, and then we have actions at the end, which is really our response to the stimulus.
That's true.
And the hypnotic techniques that you use actually focuses on the behavioral changes at the bottom by understanding the steps along the way in the middle.
Actually, the steps in the way in the middle go on within the client. What I need to know is particularly why they came in and what it is they like as an end outcome, because I always work toward objectives. If people want to drop 50 pounds, we can chunk it down to, say, 7 or 10 pound increments, whatever that might be. You know how that goes.
Yeah, you got to set the short goal before you set the long goal.
Exactly
so what
right.
what kind of areas and what kinds of things do you get involved with?
Let me check my list real quick. Thank you.
There you go.
Started with pain management in medical aspects. I help people either in dental or before, during, and after surgery. Sorts of things like that. I myself have had extensive dental work and need very little Novocaine because I can control pain. All of us can to some extent. You ask a football player, oh, for sure they can control pain.
Right.
Yes. So we're looking at pain management being one major area. Insomnia, also. I have many people, especially I think since the recent election, who've had a hard time sleeping. And so they're coming in and saying, Joan, I need some help. Need some help in sleeping at night.
How does it, and I notice hypertension's on your list here. How does it?
Hypertension is. I have a number of scripts for hypertension that actually instruct that subconscious mind to go in and regulate the veins and the arteries within the body because it has control of the entire body.
And phobia sounds like a real big issue for a lot of people.
Phobias can be. They can be because they're rooted in so many other areas. But I found that if we can go back to that initial sensitizing event,
like the 3-year-old that
like
you were
the
talking
3-year-old, yes, and be able to just kind of rule the others. It's kind of like setting up dominoes as a kid. Once you knock one over, the rest of them follow. Same thing here. You don't have to go through everything. No.
And some other areas, I notice you have self-improvement areas on this thing too. Raise self-esteem.
Raise self-esteem.
I think that would be an important thing for a lot of people.
Very important, and it's fun to watch people blossom. I don't know, I had one woman come in, it was 2009, and I just recently saw her in Walmart. I think we meet everybody in Walmart now. And she...
That's because it's the center of activity in the mountains.
In the White Mountains,
yes.
That's exactly right.
Right.
But I did not recognize her.
Oh, good.
She was that confident, standing that tall, that proud. She came over and she introduced herself and she laughed and she said, you didn't know who I was.
Yeah, I noticed it had sports on here too, and we hear a lot about professional sports, in individual sports like golf, who use hypnosis to focus on parts of that, and I noticed that. So you do a lot of this stuff And how do you do it? I mean, you do it through a process called neuro-linguistic programming?
Neuro-linguistic programming ties in beautifully
Well, tell us
with hypnosis.
tell us about that.
NLP is a process that was developed by John Grinder and Richard Bandler back in the 80s. And what they did was took a look at the giants in the world of hypnosis as well as in family practice, and decided they wanted to replicate that time and time and time again. What NLP really is open-eyed hypnosis. If you look, if you watch, for example, if you see someone that does something in a particularly elegant way, and you say to yourself, I would like to be like that person, if you can imitate that, if you can watch, mirror, and match what they do, you too will be able to succeed in that area. Now, there are some limitations. Say if we can't all be that wonderful fast runner that keeps winning every time and finally retired in the Olympics. But to the best extent that we can actually replicate. I think the best example of who took this process and ran with it is Tony Robbins.
Oh, yes.
Tony Robbins has developed all sorts of different programs for people to be able to succeed, to be better, to be leaders. His last book actually is on how to win in the stock market, how to make money. But he started out one time, he went to the federal government and he said, I understand that you'd like to have your shooters be more accurate. He said, I tell you what, I'll develop a program. What I need to do is to interview 25 of your top marksmen. I will develop a program and I will teach it to the rest of the troops. If they're successful, you can pay me, and if not, no charge. They paid him because as he went through this, he noticed and he watched and he listened to what made each and every one successful, developed it into one particular way of doing something.
So how do you do it?
How do I do it?
Yeah, how do you do it? I mean, what is the technique? I mean, how do you think through the problem when somebody comes through and uses neuro-linguistic programming, which I don't know anything about?
Which you don't know anything about.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, how would we know it as a population, what it actually is?
Okay. It's a light trance, again, open-eyed. Would you be open to a demonstration?
If we have time, you can,
okay.
or you want to do it now, you can do it now. I'm just saying, it's just so we understand what the process is. But if you want to do it now, I'm very open-eyed.
Are you very open?
I'm not asleep yet.
What NLP is a way to be able to help people shift gears, end old patterns, and get unstuck.
Okay.
Basically, that's what happens. We think in pictures. I often thought in my earlier years that we think in words because we talk to ourselves all the time. But we think in pictures.
Okay.
And the minute you change a picture, you're going to change your entire world. If I have someone come in, for example, saying, I'm not confident, I can't get a date. I've asked 10 different women, they all turn me down flat, I can't get a date. Whole body language indicates that, though. If I have someone coming in saying, I can't get a date, I don't know why I can't get a date. It's the same way, but it's the picture they have of themselves in their mind. What they're saying to themselves is, you're a loser. You're never going to get a date.
Now, you just demonstrated a little bit of that posturing.
Exactly, exactly. And as I work with someone, I help them shift the picture they have from that to something that is quite positive, quite appropriate for what it is they want to do. They don't want to be overbearing, but they do want to be confident. And they want to be engaging so that whoever they meet, they're relaxed, they're comfortable, they're able to deal with what comes up. Does that make sense?
It does. It's more than just a line.
More than just a line.
Now, I have to admit, I haven't gone on a date in a long time.
No.
And my wife probably really appreciates that.
I'm sure she does.
But, and so you're obviously able to focus on a lot of behavioral changes through this technique?
Many different behaviors. I would say most anything that comes through the door can be helped with this particular technique. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And we do have a few minutes left, and if you want to demonstrate it, I'll be a willing sort of guinea pig, just so that I understand.
I think you would enjoy.
Okay.
Let's start with something. Do you have anything that causes anxiety? Any kind of issue in your life?
Yes, I do.
All right. When you feel that feeling, where does it begin and where does it end in your body?
It begins with the anticipation of the event that's going to cause the anxiety.
All right.
And it continues through that event, and then is only resolved when I don't have to face that event any longer.
Got that right. Now, if you were to take that and put it within your body, does it start in your head and go down to your tummy? Does it start in your gut and go up to your heart? Does it clutch at your throat and go down to your feet? Where does that feeling begin and where does it end?
It starts in my head, and it actually goes to my shoulders to make them feel tense and weaker. And it just slows my movements.
Indeed it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if we were to give that number on a scale, if we were to give that feeling on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the maximum of how that could be felt, and a 1 being, it's no problem for me, where would you place that right now?
Well, right now, since I'm not facing the event, I'm at the 1. But
when you do face the event.
When I do face the event, probably a 6 or 7.
Probably a 6 or 7. Let's pull that energy out of you and put it in front of you. And if it were a shape, what kind of a shape might that be?
Had never thought about that.
It's a peculiar question, isn't it?
Yes, it is a peculiar question.
Now, what kind of shape would that be? Is it kind of a blob, or is it a triangle? Maybe a square? Maybe a circle?
It would probably be a blob.
A blob. Is it a large blob or kind of a small one?
Probably a small blob.
Okay. And what color is this small blob?
Black.
Black, of course. And is it heavy or is it lightweight?
Probably lightweight.
Probably lightweight. And if this large black blob were to spin in a direction, which way would it go? Would it spin to the left or would it spin to the right?
I don't know that it would necessarily spin. It's just there.
It is just there. But if it were to spin, would it spin to the left or would it spin to the right?
Well, my first thought would be left.
Be to
clockwise.
the left. Let's have it slow down and start to spin to the right.
It doesn't want to do that.
I know that, because that's not the way it usually goes.
Okay.
But let's have it, just for old time's sake,
Okay.
let's have it spin to the right.
Okay.
Okay, and let's change the shape.
Let's change it to round.
Let's change it to round. Same size or a little bit smaller, a little bit larger?
A little bit larger.
A little bit larger, okay. And let's change the color, something you would prefer.
Oh, definitely red.
Definitely red, okay.
And I can actually visualize that now.
Sure you can. And let's make it sparkle. No sparkles.
Not easy to do, but
Okay.
it's still just a red ball, round,
And it's spinning to the right.
and it's spinning to the right.
Good. Is the pace that it's spinning, is that comfortable for you?
Yes, right
Good.
now it is.
Good. And let's put that back inside you. And is there a difference in how you feel when you think about that situation?
Well, the anxiety that I felt at the beginning of this discussion isn't there.
Thank
The
you.
thought process is not there.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about something different.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And that's how it works. It's so much easier to demonstrate than it is to describe. When I learned these processes and got trained in NLP and in hypnosis, so much easier to experience it than to try and explain and describe what it is.
It was weird.
Who is weird?
I'd say that was weird.
That was weird. Now, how do you feel on that scale from 1 to 10? Is it down to a 1?
Well, I'm not thinking about it anymore, so it's
Isn't that
down
nice?
to a 1. Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
But I would say, interestingly, I was able to focus
Yes.
on something that, is a particular issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have solved that issue in a different manner in my life because I've had to face it, since I was a kid.
Sure.
And I have ways of overcoming that.
Of course you do.
And
yes.
so, but an interesting exercise.
Isn't that curious?
Yes, it is curious. I didn't expect that. Now we have just a few minutes, just a minute or so left in this. Hypnosis is not new.
Hypnosis is not new. Hypnosis began, they have actual pictures of hieroglyphs in the pyramids of ancient Egyptians using this. People would come in with problems and issues, and the priests would come through the temples and whisper positive things in their ears all night long. 1500 BC, there's also evidence.
They have those things of studying that they talk about being able to listen to your lessons at nighttime.
Exactly.
Is that the same type of focusing?
It would be very similar.
Okay.
Very similar. But again, if you think about it, there's that twilight time before you actually slip into sleep and as you're waking up in the morning, that's also hypnotic. That's that hypnotic time.
Wow.
And you how about if you programmed your day and you said, boy, I'm waking up, I feel really good, rather than saying, oh dear, it's another day.
Well, I always feel really good because I'm retired and I don't have to get up to go to work anymore. And we're about out of time, Joan. An incredibly interesting approach to problem solving in our daily lives. Had never thought about the hypnosis nor the thought process that you have discussed. And I'm going to thank you for being a guest. Our guest today was Joan Courtney of Unstuck Living, and you heard what Unstuck came from. And we thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again. Thank you.